Today we look at an activity called codification in a warehouse. Codification involves having codes. Let's look at this shelf here. How many items do you see on this shelf? From the top to the bottom, we have a variety of items. Some are similar, some complement each other. Now, all these items have to be given codes. A code is like an identification number to identify the item in the store. Each of these items need to have a different identification number. Just like human being has fingerprints. All of us have different types of prints. You can never find two people with a matching fingerprints. And so it has to be in a warehouse, in a store. Each different item needs to have its own code for either identification. And that is why we have this activity called codification to help in the process of identifying an item. Simply give it a simple description. How do you describe an item? At times you may find that describing an item, you may give a vague description. We all have different understanding of things, and this may cause confusion. And that is why we need accurate identifications, and this is where codes come in. You don't need to have something very lengthy, something precise, and that is why we have codification. Imagine a warehouse with over 1,000 items, and you have to describe all those different items. It becomes a very laborious activity for you as a warehouse manager. Hence codification. Look at these chairs we have here. We have 8 different chairs. How do you describe them? The chair with the green seat, the chair with red arms, the gray chair, the brown chair, all of them, one thing for sure is that they are chairs. So why not develop a code for each? For example, the first chair is CH1, that type. The second type, you may call it CH2, that type, whereby CH refers to the master code for all chairs, begin with CH. What about a rubbish container? What would you refer to it as? Dustbin, rubbish box, refuse container? All these cause confusion in a warehouse, and that is why we need to adopt codification, whereby we give numbers, figures, letters to items. They may be numeric, they may be alphabetic like we see here, maybe A, B, C, D, E, F, it may be P, Q, R, X, Y, Z, depending on the organization that you are working in. It's imperative that every procurement professional has codification in the stores. And what items are we going to code? All items in our stores, ranging from raw materials, components, work in progress, finished goods, whether cables, wires, materials, repair, operations, components, the screws, all have to be coded, and each has an identification number. We're going to look at about 6 types of codification, ranging from the simple one, alphabetic, alphanumeric, which combines alphabets and numerals, the decimal ones, the numeric system, and the mnemonic system. Let's start with alphabetic. Alphabet is as easy as ABC, whereby alphabets are allocated to different materials. If it is raw materials, you allocate them A, tools B, spares C, general supplies D. So what kind of raw materials do we have? The first raw material may be, depending on your organization, what raw materials are you looking at? The first raw material, you may refer to it as A, and then you add on, if the raw material is maybe water, it may be the AW, depending. Because you'll find that raw materials may be several also. That means you have to put a provision for the second part of the raw material. The tools, it may be a hammer, it may be a screwdriver. If B is the master, then you may think of having a second letter to cater for the kind of raw material. But here we're looking at alphabet, which takes us to mnemonic, also similar to alphabetic. But only that here we'll find ourselves using more than one alphabetic letter. If it's a ball bearing, you'll call it BB. If it's a steel screw, you refer to it as SS. Steel wire, SW. Rubber belts, RB. Steel bolt, SB. Now the challenge comes here is when there are other items which also have the same letters. For example, if there's a steel brick, would you refer to it as SB also? Or you would have to look for some other letter to add on. We have ball bearing, and there are other items which have two B's also. A bearing bolt. Now this is a challenge you may find with coding, and you have to make provisions for that in a warehouse. Then we have the numeric ones, which looks at straight numbers, the numerals. You use numbers for the different items. Allocate these different numbers. Let's look at raw materials. Again, 0. We'll start with 0. But remember, again, just like we said in the first one, the alphabetic one, what about the second part of the raw material? Because raw materials differ. You have to cater for this. Tools also 1. So you have a screwdriver, it's a tool. You have a hammer, it's a tool. So when you have it, 1H for one hammer. How many types of hammers are there? There are different types of hammers. Sledge hammers. Machinery items will be 2. We also know that machinery items are many because a machine is made up of different components. So here we shall start with the 2, and then we have to make provisions for all the others that follow. Medical products, sanitizer, 5S. But there are different types of sanitizers, remember. There's one which is like a cream, a gel, one which is liquid. Again, it will have 5, but the S, you may have to add on 5, the medical product, S for sanitizer, G for gel, 5SL then. If not, 5SG for sanitizer gel, sanitizer liquid. Decimals. A decimal is a very simple thing. You're looking at adding a point in the middle. Very easy method. Now, the whole number here, the first number indicates the main group, or what we refer to as master group. and the decimal represents the subgroup. Just like we talked about here, raw materials would be the main group. The other kind of raw material would be the subgroup. Machinery item would be the main group. When you go to the actual machinery item, subgroup. This is why with the decimal one works well for us in developing of codes. Let's look at this good example here. Metals, all metals are going to be coded with, starting with 2.0. How many metals are there? It is an aluminium metal, 2.01. Zinc, 2.02. Iron, 2.03. This one works better for us. It simplifies the whole process. If it's a raw material, what kind of raw materials are we talking about? All raw materials are going to be 3.0. If it's plastic, it will be 3.01. If it's leather, 3.02. It is paper, 3.03. But again, I want you to note that you may have different kinds of plastic. So what happens? You may find yourself having to put another provision here for the first kind of plastic, maybe 3.011. The other one, another type of plastic, may be 3.012. And the good thing with this decimal method is that it is very flexible and very unlimited. You can expand it. Even if you have 100 types of plastic, you will have provisions for them. Even leather, paper, if it's photocopying paper, if it is printing paper, you have provisions for expanding it. Alphanumeric combines both the alpha and the numeric. Now, the alphabet part of it represents the main group. And the numbers again represent the subgroup. Let's look at this example. We're looking at plywood. We all know what plywood is. It is used for making cardboards, at times beds. But we have very many kinds of plywood. So here, the code for all plywood would be PW, meaning plywood. But you have 1/4 inch of plywood. So the 1/4 inch, which is 1/4, would be reflected as 1/4. But different grades of plywood. Grade 1 would be 141, grade 2, 142, grade 3, if it is partial, partial 1, partial 2, partial 3. And this makes it very simple for us. Color codification, where we're using colors to mark items, just like we did when we were young in nursery, to mark items, playing with colors and all that. Very easy method. You can mark the cables, components in the store, the drums. Like here we have green for iron, blue for steel, black, red for copper, black for aluminium. But you see, with codification, we need to have flexibility. And colors are limited, as you can see from the color chart we have here. You may run out of options if you have over 1,000 items in the stores. What are you going to do? You find yourself limited. So simply put, that's what codification does. And its objectives is about having all similar items together. Like we said, raw materials are together, plywood is together, the generic items, master items, the ions are together. In so doing, you classify the items according to their nature. Reason, in a store, you don't want to have duplication of items where you're having the same item having different numbers. And at the end of the day, this helps you in specifying. We're going to look at the specification specification process in principles of procurement. I'm very sure you've been taught about specification, which is a detailed description of an item, or what we refer to as the statement of requirements. So codification helps you in specifying. The user department is interested in which item. This is the item, code number ABCD. Bring the item and we say, this is the item. Let's see the specifications of this item, the inches, the weight. And these are some of the things you use when you're codifying. You may use the inches, like we saw the plywood. We said quarter inch. So, what are the steps involved in this process? Remember, we said we have to have the general group. Do we know the generic group? For example, raw materials is a generic group. Say raw materials, it may be metals. Metals becomes a generic group. Then you divide the metals into subgroups because you look at different kinds of metal. We said aluminium, copper, iron. Then if there are different sizes of aluminium, again, you divide that into different subgroups. And that is how we come up with a code. But it's very important to know the general group, main group, subdivide it, keep subdividing. Now, coding has several principles that ought to be adhered to. There needs to be consistency. For example, say there has to be a main group throughout the whole process. Comprehensiveness in that you have got to keep subdividing until the smallest subgroup. But also try to keep it simple and brief because you don't want to have a complicated process. It should be easy to adapt by anyone that comes in. Meaning that when you leave tomorrow, someone else takes over your position. They can easily fit in and adapt to the coding system you put in place. Elastic to cater for all items in the warehouse. Like I said, whether there are 1,000 items or 20,000, the coding system needs to cater for them. And that is why we say there has got to be no duplication because the system should be elastic enough to cater for every item. Very good system that comes with these benefits to the organization. You have all the items grouped very well. You can easily identify them. You're not duplicating items. And at the end of the day, it helps in standardization, whereby you'll cut down in the number of similar items. The earlier video recording I shared with you was about standardization, whereby you want to cut on similar items. Now with codification, you will know which similar items you have in place in your warehouse. And then you will embark on the process of standardization and variety reduction. Once each item has a number, once each item has an NIN, once each item has a fingerprint, it creates accuracy in your records. Remember, one of the most important things in the warehouse is having proper records of items in the warehouse so that you can be able to issue and have requisitions. These records are very important for stock accuracy, which takes us to the next point of stock accuracy. This can only be possible when you have a proper coding system that records everything that is in the warehouse. And so at the end of the day, when you're issuing materials, you are not going to have a problem as a stores manager. Thank you very much. We shall continue this discussion when we meet.